Hi everyone, and welcome to Saturday Studio, the Norton's virtual art making session meant to expand your creativity through art making activities inspired by the collection. My name is Kate Faulkner, Associate Curator of Education for Public Programs here at the Norton. I'm also a working artist working with paint and collage. Today we are going to focus on how to create an abstract painting based on observation of an object. I encourage you to browse images on our website under the Collections tab to find an object you like, but you can work from any artwork or any object you have at home. For today's project, I have chosen a pair of Chinese wine pots in the form of the Chinese character for longevity and happiness. The wine pots with a handle and spout are made from molded porcelain with overglaze enamel and enamel decoration. Each of these pots or ewers features scenes of a crane, which is a symbol of longevity, flying over a temple in the inset panels in the center of the face. The objects are visually very dense with patterns, objects, and scenery. When I look at it, I feel a sense of serenity and calmness because of the harmonious shapes and colors. This is what I will try to express and make apparent in my painting. What do you feel when you look at this object and the painting patterns that decorate its surface? I would like for you to think about what emotions you would like to capture and express through this abstraction activity. Today, we will be using these two Chinese pots purely as inspiration for our paintings. We are not thinking of it as a model to try and replicate or copy. To use the pots as inspiration for our abstract painting, we first need to step back and depend on careful observation to interpret how the object makes us feel when we look at it. Once we have allowed ourselves enough time to understand how we are reacting emotionally to what we are viewing, the next step is to begin selecting elements which stand out to us, or that you find particularly interesting. Once you have chosen an element or elements of the object to abstract, we will paint them in a simplified manner and think about the composition and combination of these simplified forms to create a new abstract image directly inspired by the object and that expresses a specific mood and a state of mind. So I will use a pencil. I've got some pencils here that I'm going to use just to draw the border of my painting and any additional elements that I want to pencil in first over the paint. And I'm also going to use an eraser. I brought a few colors of acrylic paint, some purple, green, some raw sienna, and yellow, really just using colors that I've found in the object as inspiration. So I've got a couple images of the Chinese pot here to kind of refer back to. And then I've also got a ruler to draw the borders of my painting, a cup of water, and some paper towels. If you are going to use paint like I am, I would recommend using a thicker paper to make your painting on. I'm just using some watercolor paper that's nice and thick for wet media that I've cut down into just smaller size pieces of paper to paint on. But if you are working with dry media like colored pencils or pastels, you can use any paper that you prefer, any paper that you like, that you have around the house. It doesn't have to be thick watercolor paper. So once we've gathered all of our materials, we can go ahead and get started. The first step is to draw a rectangle with pencil. Just create a border for your painting. And I think probably a 1/2-inch border for this would be fine. So you can just use your ruler to go ahead and create that. And that border just helps your finished painting have a little bit of breathing room. And you can use, really, if you want to make your border smaller or bigger, that's completely up to you. You can also use a bigger size pieces of paper. But for the purposes of this activity, I thought I would just keep it on the smaller side. And if you want to clean up the borders with your eraser, that's completely fine. Okay, while I'm creating the border and getting this ready to paint, let's think of a composition that translates the harmony and calm nature of the patterns that are painted on the surface of the wine pots. Let's look at the objects again. We can see the different calligraphic shapes which make up the form of the pot, and those are loose, almost gestural forms that you can see, which create the form of the wine pot, and they curl and bend to form the body of the container. So to translate the motion of the swirling organic line, I would like to mimic the shape so that it retains that soft, gentle quality, but I don't want to focus on trying to create an exact representation of the object or the form. I'm really just using it as an inspiration for my painting. I'm just really capturing the general shape and essence through the shape of the line that I'm going to draw. And I just want to remind you that abstraction shouldn't be complicated. In fact, it should be really about simplification and just allowing yourself to experiment. So I wanted to really try to mimic the shape of the wine pot, and I went ahead and just drew a very loose gestural line here on this piece of paper that I've already kind of gotten started on. You can see I've drawn the border, the margins, and then I've really just taken inspiration from the shape of the pot and just drew a really loose, fun line in the middle of the rectangle. And that's a nice way to define the space of your composition. I like to go ahead and create the background first and then paint inside to sort of help define some guidelines and map out the space of my painting. Okay, now I'm going to begin painting the sections of my background, and that will help, again, create a framework for what I can then add on top in terms of elements that I find interesting from the painting. Things that I kind of stand out to me are the flower patterns, the shapes of the greenery and the vines, and also the flying crane in the center. So I've gone ahead and mixed up some colors that I want to use for the background. I really want to pull out the green that's on the exterior of the pot, this like really beautiful light mint green. So I've mixed up some of that color using phthalo green, which is the blue shade, and a little bit of white. And then I also mixed up some darker greens from the greenery and a brown shade, and also a little bit of a darker green, and then some purple, because I do really like the purple flowers that are kind of spotted throughout the object, and then also just some gray, because there is a lot of kind of neutral gray and tan colors in the piece. So just go ahead and mix up whatever colors you have and that you like, and then you can get started on filling in the background of your painting. So I'm going to use a pretty small brush to fill in the colors. If you just want to have like a little cup of water, keep your brush wet when you're getting the paint kind of thinned out. So I'll start with the yellow color and just get a little bit of paint and begin filling in the background shape. Okay, so I've got the yellow filled in, and next I think I'll use this green color that's on the sides. I'll just pick up a little bit of that and start filling it in. And again, it doesn't have to be the perfect match. If it's a little off, it's no big deal. It's again an abstraction, so we're referencing the object, but we're not trying to copy it or reproduce it exactly. And just a little composition tip when you're creating your background, and also once we finish the background and we start adding other elements on top of it, make sure that you are thinking about varying the scale of the shapes that you're adding, and varying the color too. That will definitely improve the composition's interest, and will just make the composition overall a little bit more engaging and interesting. So you just want to make sure and vary the scale and the color of the forms. Like I have here, I've got some smaller forms here and then some other big spaces around it. So there's variation and movement with the spaces. And I will try to continue that with the additional elements that I add once the background is laid in. Okay, so the green is down, and now I'm going to use a little bit of the gray that I mixed up. It's a really light gray. It's really just titanium white and then a little bit of neutral gray that I've just added like a tiny, tiny bit to, just enough to tint the white, or sorry, to shade the white. Then you don't need much. So I'm trying to match or kind of interpret the gray that's inside of the flowers and then also around the center portion. So again, it's not exact, but it is kind of hinting at it, referring back to it. Just trying to get the essence of the object here. I think that's the most important part, to remember that you're just really trying to capture the essence of it. Okay, so that's down. And then I'll go ahead and fill in the smaller parts with, we've got this Jenkins green. It's really nice, kind of like pine tree green that I feel like I'm seeing a lot in the wine pot on the surface. So I'll fill this piece, and you may need a smaller brush when you're getting into the smaller spaces and shapes and forms of your background. So I'll grab a smaller brush here. Okay, we've got the green, and then the last two colors are brown and a little bit of purple. So I'll add the purple here, and this purple is just a really beautiful bright purple. And again, if you want to experiment with watercolor for this, you can. It will work perfectly well. I just happen to like using acrylic paint. You can use watercolor, you can use gouache, colored pencil, whatever you have around that you enjoy working with. Okay, and then finally we'll do the brown. This is just a basic burnt umber. Okay, so I have the background painted and it's dry. And as you can see, I want the kind of feeling of this to mimic the decoration of the object that I'm referring to, but through using a range of colors in different forms. We really want to avoid areas being too similar and uniform, and we do that by using contrasting shapes, colors, and different scales. Okay, so the next part of this project is going to be adding a little bit more detail to your background and using your background as a framework for these details that you are interested in and want to incorporate in your painting. So I really am interested in using the shape of these flowers around the surface decoration of the wine pot. I really like how they're just kind of scattered and they're all kind of in different directions, and it's just a really like pleasing, harmonious pattern to me. So I'm going to use that. And as you can see, I have gone ahead and just drawn a very abstracted version of the leaves. And I'm keeping the general shape of the object, but I want to avoid capturing any details of it, and more just borrowing what's striking me most and expressing it in my own abstract language. So I've kind of scattered them around the painting, and I think I'm going to go ahead and just start filling those shapes in with, I really like the purple, so I'm just going to pick up some of the purple paint and start filling in the flower shapes with that. And again, it's really, there's no rules here. It's really whatever you're interested in capturing and translating in your painting. So I'm going to just fill in these flower shapes with my paint. Okay, so now you can see that I have filled in the shapes of the flowers on top of the painting with the purple that I think is really beautiful here on the surface. And the next step I wanted to add was I really wanted to bring out the shape of the crane that's in the middle of the pot here in this little emblem in the center. I feel like that's a really important feature of the object, and I wanted to have it represented in my painting. So I drew a very abstracted form of the crane here. Again, I really decided to get rid of all the features. I'm not painting the feathers, I'm not painting the beak or the eye. I'm really just getting the essence of the shape of the crane here. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect because you have your eraser and you can paint over it. So feel free to kind of use your pencil to figure out what shape you think is best. So I decided to make it pretty large since I've already added some smaller decorations here on the bottom right-hand corner. I thought it would be nice to add something up here in the top that's a little bigger, brighter, and will contrast with the smaller shapes of the flowers. So I think I'm going to fill in that shape with a darker green color. So I'll get a bigger brush and start filling that shape in. And again, the painting like this probably would take you anywhere from, an hour, a couple hours to start and complete, depending on the size and the amount of detail that you want to include. So for the purposes of this project, I am painting a smaller painting, but it would still probably take me a couple of hours to complete from start to finish. And something I do like about acrylic paint is that when you thin it out with water or another medium, I'm using water here, you can start to, it starts to become translucent and you can see some of the background color. So I like that. I like when all of my layers aren't completely opaque. But if you like um, your layers opaque, then just add another layer of paint once this dries and you will get that effect. Okay, so I have filled in the crane with the green, and as you can see, it's a little translucent. I like that, and it's keeping the general form of the crane without making it too specific. So I'm really avoided trying to represent any details of the bird. I was just kind of borrowing what strikes me the most and expressing it again in my own abstract language, which is will be different from what you decide to represent in your painting. Another composition tip that you should try to avoid making your painting look too flat is to experiment with overlapping shapes so that only certain areas are visible. So I've done that with the crane here. I decided I wanted to make it a big shape and covered up a good portion of the background. But that will help you give illusion of depth in your painting, and it starts to seem like a lot of the elements are starting to float on top of each other. So I could keep going with this painting, and I think I'm going to, but I think I'm at a good stopping point, and I really hope that you enjoyed this activity today. It was my pleasure to make this abstract painting with you. I hope it inspired you to look at art and objects you're surrounded by in a new way. Please be sure to share your painting on social media and tag it with the hashtag Norton Saturday Studio. Thank you so much for joining, and we will see you next month for another edition of Saturday Studio.